Hey, everybody. Welcome to our final edition of our Down Ballot Progressive Candidate Summit. I hope that you've been enjoying these interviews. I really have. I wanted more people to have a chance to meet some of the fabulous candidates who are running for office. I think sometimes when it comes to your congressional representatives, the candidates for Congress, the candidates for Senate, you don't really know who they are. And because you don't know who they are, not enough of us participate. And also, it's so important that we participate in races that go beyond just our own district or even our own state, because once people get to Congress, which once again can't be said too often, is a co-equal branch of the government, all of these people, once they're there, are going to be voting on legislation that affects all of our lives. So we've had some fabulous candidates, and I'm so grateful to all of you who have gone to the Progressive Candidate Summit .com site, have donated to these people's candidacies. I know how hard it is. And obviously, so many of these candidates, all of them really, because they're progressives, are usually not the ones who are being supported by the institutional elite Democratic establishment. They are people who are supported by the people. They're not standing up for corporate interests. They're not standing up for a capitalism that's run amok, that has forgotten its heart, its soul, its ethical center, and that has a sense of responsibility, fiduciary responsibility to short-term profits for its stockholders, too often at the expense of people, at the expense of the planet, and at the expense of animals. We're going to change all that. That's what's happening right now. We are living in these amazing transitional times. As I speak to you, the president is speaking in Tulsa. We're all very aware of the spiritual contest, the philosophical contest. That is the philosophical debate and contest that has been with us from our earliest days. Every generation lives it. Every generation has the same struggle within its drama, and ours is no different. In fact, ours is turning out to be a high point of that dramatic struggle. Love can win. Love's gonna win. We are going to take this idea of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people seriously in our time. And we will have what Abraham Lincoln called a new birth of freedom. There's already been a resurgence of hate, a resurgence of bigotry, a resurgence of racism, a resurgence of anti-Semitism, a resurgence of Islamophobia, a resurgence of homophobia. And now there's going to be a rebirth of love and a rebirth of freedom and a rebirth of justice. Why? Because we say so. And we're going to say so with our votes. And those votes are going to be for our congressional representatives, our senatorial representatives, and our president in November. So let's get started with our wonderful, wonderful candidate who's here with us tonight. His name is Liam O'Mara. I'm so glad he's here, and he is running to represent California's 42nd district. Liam, welcome to the Zoom room. Can't wait to see your face. It'll be here any minute. Hi, how are you? Welcome. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just got to say, I love that you mentioned this philosophical contest. I mean, I am by profession a historian of ideas. So I study our religious traditions, our philosophical traditions, and watching that change, that contest, that war of ideas over time is a huge part of what I do. And we are at a critical moment in our history now.
Well, you're a man after my own heart, because this is where I live in my heart. My daughter, by the way, is right now working on her PhD in history and religious history, interestingly enough. And I think too many Americans are unaware, right? Not so much unaware, but just haven't really thought about the fact that the founding of this country was not just a radical unfoldment politically, but also philosophically.
Yes.
And it unfolded based on principles that even many of the people who inscribed those principles were themselves not living, right? So from the very, very beginning, we were the most enlightened principles that had ever imbued the founding of a nation, and 41 of the signers of the Declaration out of the 54 were themselves slave owners. So that dichotomy has been with us from the beginning. That's in our character. It's in our national DNA, right?
And it's common for people to then dwell on the negatives in the lives of them, but they forget then that these were extremely progressive men, very forward thinkers for their time. And that Enlightenment context, that idea of doing better and always improving,
Absolutely.
that was written into the structure of this country. And we were supposed to continue to improve upon that and realize some of that promise.
To form a more perfect union. And I'm so glad that you said that, Liam, because even though there are people who tend to be on the right side of the political spectrum, who only want to talk about what we've done right and have no listening for the shadows we need to look at, there are equally unbalanced thinkers, I believe, on the left, who only want to talk about what America has done wrong without recognizing that not only have we not done everything wrong, but that we were founded on the principles that are actually what give us the ability to make things right. Well, what excites me about your candidacy is because that kind of in-depth conversation belongs in politics. And that kind of in-depth conversation should be present in the halls of Congress. Because if all we're talking about are the externalities, then we're just talking about the symptoms and we're not addressing the cause, right?
It absolutely does. And I often make analogies along that. If you're slapping a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage, you're never going to actually get it. We have to start talking about the root causes. We have to start talking about the real rot in the center of our politics. And too few people are doing that. Our Congress member right now is a virtual ghost. In 28 years, he has never chaired a committee. I want to be someone standing on the floor of the House and pushing forward our ideas, engaging in this debate, inviting the public in and talking about where we could go as a society.
They're like several of the people that so many of the people that we've had on the summit, I've just thought, oh, would I love to hear that person on the floor of the House. Well, the thing is, as you just said, your opponent has been there since 1992. I mean, come on, everybody. How can somebody who's been there almost 30 years not be so, it's such an entrenched mindset. And also so many of the people who are there, they represent this legalized, technocratic, rationalistic view of politics. I love the fact that you're a college professor. I love the fact that you have taught about these kinds of ideas. And particularly, I love the fact that you're a specialist in Middle East affairs. I think sometimes, people talk about how important it is that we have Medicare for all, which of course you support, Green New Deal, which you support, dealing with the college loans, all of the things, environmental issues, all of those boxes you check. But I think it's also so unique and wonderful to me. People need to remember that Congress people vote on legislation that affects foreign affairs as well. And the fact that you have a deep understanding of the history of the Middle East, including the history of the United States, and particularly our military action in the Middle East, makes me really want you to win. So I want everybody to go to liamomara.org. That's liamomara.org. He is running in California District 42. He is running against an incumbent, a Republican incumbent who's been there almost 30 years. And he's not chairing any committees, which means he hasn't, he's not doing much except getting the support, including from President Trump, I assume, Liam?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And he deliberately flies below the radar. The Republican Party, he's the most powerful Republican in California because he's been in so long, but they keep him only on subcommittees where he can do these backroom deals that help out corporations and then avoid the limelight because he is consistently ranked as one of the top 10 most corrupt people in the House. 98% of his contributions come directly from corporations. The largest share of that from the military industrial complex. So it's no surprise he's voted for every single use of force. Every war that we've, again, been involved in the last nearly 30 years now.
Let me get clear about this, though. You've got Northrop Grumman and some of those that are down there, probably even in your district, right? So you're a real hub of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. There's Southern California in general has a huge defense industry, plays a big part in that. And they are very happy to throw money at him and keep him there because he continues to help spread that out all across the country, making it harder and harder to cut the spending on here. So we have this massive corporate welfare going in to produce weapons. And if you create that much stuff, the people in power are going to use it. And we have destructive use of it.
Right. And then every time they need a new model of the airplane, the bomber, or the tanker, they say, why don't you take the old model, send it back to the boys at home in our domestic police forces? And that's why we see one of the reasons why there's such a militarization of the police. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And deliberate recruitment. I mean, the LAPD, I grew up in Los Angeles County, right next to Riverside County. And LAPD deliberately has recruited a lot of ex-military people and purchased a lot of military-grade equipment, which changes the way you approach policing. Absolutely. If policing comes out of the community, then it serves the interests of the community. If it thinks of itself as at a war with people and at war with crime, then it approaches things oftentimes as an occupying force.
Yeah, like an occupying force rather than peacekeepers. Well, unfortunately, due to some very, very tragic incidents, people are beginning to see what you're saying. and
Yeah,
understand
absolutely.
that we have a system that is fundamentally broken. And I think everyone that's really the point of electing progressives. You know, Liam does not have a Democratic challenger in a primary. So in this particular case, that's not an issue. But in all of these others that we've been talking about, there are shades of blue. So it's not enough just to have, you know, a corporatist Democrat. Last night when we were talking to Betsy Sweet, or when we talked about Andrew Romanoff, we need more than a Democrat in there. We need progressives in there. Progressives who are actually standing not just for incremental change, but for fundamental change. This country is off course. We are off course with our own ideals. In a way, it's the most traditional thing in the world, what we want. We want a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We want, hello, liberty and justice for all. We want the right to pursue happiness for all. And we remember the words of the Declaration of Independence, that governments are instituted to secure those rights. And when the government's not performing that function, it is the right of the people to alter it or to abolish it. We don't want to abolish it, but damn right, we want to alter it, and that's why we're here. So, Liam, I want to bring on a couple of people who have questions for you, but before we do, give us all a little bit of a picture. You got elected, it's your first day. What are you most interested in? Who are you going to talk to? What are your dreams for what you want to accomplish as a congressman from California 42?
Well, you've already mentioned the interest in global affairs in the Mideast. I'd be aiming for the Foreign Affairs Committee so we can actually bring on, a knowledgeable voice in a lot of these issues. When they come around to these decisions, they often do solicit opinions from academics just to say that they do, and then do exactly the opposite of it. It was infuriating to me to find out that years into the Iraq War, no one had bothered even to tell George Bush that there was such a thing as Sunnis and Shias and that this could cause a problem. The way that Iraq would play out, we knew what would happen, and it has done exactly that. People in government are simply not listening, and a lot of that is willful because this is in the interest of the corporations that sell those guns. We have to take more control of these things.
Before he died, Robert McNamara, in talking about the tragedy and the terrible mistake, as he referred to it, the Vietnam War, he said, we didn't know anything about the people of Vietnam. We didn't know anything about the culture of Vietnam. We didn't know anything about the history of Vietnam, and we didn't have anyone there to tell us.
And in the process, we have to remember the 57,000 Americans who died there, and rightly so, but we tend to paper over the 2 million Vietnamese who died in the course of that conflict, and the continuing an unfolding tragedy. We do almost nothing to help. There are still children who fall on these Honeywell cluster bombs and blow themselves up today, decades after that conflict, because we left all that stuff there. You still have massive incidents of birth defects in South Vietnam because of the amount of chemical weapons we dumped on the country, and there's no responsibility for it. And yes, you mentioned an interesting point earlier about, the balancing there. Sometimes coming from the left, you're too hard and you're focusing only on that negative. And we forget the fact that as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, we can take control of this, take responsibility for what we've done, and do better in future.
Okay, everybody, don't you go and say there's nothing we can do. Not when there are people like Liam O'Mara who are running, but we need to help them. I hope you'll go to liamomara.org, LIAMOMARA.org, or you can go to the donation page at progressivecandidatesummit.com. Do what you can. And also, for all of these candidates, Liam included, you can work on his campaign. You don't have to be in his district. They'll use you, right, Liam? They'll use
Absolutely.
you for contacting. They'll use you for texting. Go to liamomara.org, sign up, participate. November is going to be here sooner than you know. There is no excuse for us letting a Republican Trump supporting congressman who has been there since 1992 get in again. It will only be because we allow it to happen. And
this district is demographically purple. It could flip. Yeah. And running on a populist strategy is actually an advantage out here. In the primary, we had the best Democratic turnout in 20 years.
Hello.
This could be flipped. We can do this. We just need to support the phone banking operations. So your donations, your help, your volunteer efforts, they mean the world to us.
And one of the reasons these flips are possible is because all the young people, millions of people who this year will be voting, who were never able to vote before. And I want all of you to remember, there are people who will be voting this time for the first time who were not even born in the 20th century. They should not be burdened by old ideas left over from the 20th century. We need a 21st century perspective, far more holistic, far more looking at cause, not just symptom, far more looking at the interrelatedness of all human beings, humanity with nature, etc. We need a new consciousness. And the younger people find that natural. They don't find it so odd, and they're ready to vote for people like Liam. And I think we have one of them here. So I'd like to invite Edison Gomez Kraus. What an interesting name. There's a lot there with Gomez Kraus. I'll tell you who is coming into the Zoom room now. Welcome, Edison Gomez Kraus. Come be with us. Hi, welcome.
Hi, hey Marianne, hey Liam. Thanks for having me.
So before we even go, I want to know about the Gomez Kraus. So you have an interesting lineage. Is that your mother and your father's names hyphenated?
That's correct. Yeah, I believe my mother has an equal right to my lineage, so I kind of.
So what do you have, a Latino and a German? Is that what it is?
That's correct. Mexican.
Blood. You were incapable of being uninteresting. That's what I would say, based on your name. So Edison, what have you got on your mind, and what is your question for Liam?
Okay, so my biggest concern here is, well, what I'd like to know of Liam is, what are your thoughts on the drug war and the impact it's had on lowering communities? And most importantly, what actions and position would you take once in office to counteract state and local pay-to-play cannabis legislation that is basically excluding the communities that were ravaged by the drug war?
Yeah, okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. First off, the war on drugs is a load of crap. And we as voters should have learned from prohibition in the 1920s that outlawing something people want will only create organized crime and make the whole thing more dangerous for everyone.
Nixon just made it up to begin with. It wasn't even a problem. He made it.
But the drug war is sometimes called a failure, but it's really not. It has done exactly what its architects wanted. Stopping drug use was never the goal. It exists to lock up poor and minority communities, disrupt their families, and keep them under control, and to favor large corporate lobbies like those for the pharmaceutical industry and for logging in the case of cannabis. I mean, and as far as Edison brings up the state's efforts to legalize on their own, all this can do is put pressure on the federal government. It can't actually solve the problem. The real action has to happen at the federal level. Whatever California says, cannabis is still a Schedule I narcotic, considered more dangerous than cocaine, which is frankly racist, nakedly corrupt, and idiotic.
And stupid, yeah.
Until the federal government classifies cannabis as a naturally occurring plant to be treated like any other crop, the states and municipalities, the localities, can draft all kinds of discriminatory laws. They can set high barriers for entry to cannabis farmers, which will price them out in favor of the big corporations. They can block small businesses from opening up dispensaries to sell products or whatever. I believe that drugs need to be legalized at the federal level, and that legislation should be written in a way that favors the interests of those legacy farmers and the communities most affected by the prohibition. Addiction to drugs is a medical problem, period, and should never have been treated as a criminal one. We need to end the drug war, release all nonviolent drug convicts and expunge their records, and regulate drugs like any other food or pharmaceutical.
I think some of those people that are released from jail too should receive tax breaks, should receive all kinds of help. Because
absolutely, they deserve compensation for what was done to those communities.
Edison, may I ask how old you are?
I'm 32 years old.
And what do you do, may I ask?
I'm an ESL teacher, and I'm also the founding member of Cannabis Farmers Association in the Inland Empire.
What do you think? Do you think that people you're in Liam's district, are you?
My community is, yes.
Okay. Do you feel that the energy is there and that people are going to show up for this and support him and make it happen?
Most definitely. A lot of young people are very excited about his campaign. I want more young people to find out about it, but I think he is the right fit for the district. We're sick of Calvert, and well, we're sick of his non-action, and we need people taking these bold progressive positions, which honestly, you hit the mark on every single one of those points you hit. So yeah, well, very much so.
People like Calvert are just there to perpetuate an entrenched status quo that is inherently unjust. And this is the perfect moment when you said you want more people to find out about Liam. Hello, everybody. That's a good moment for me to make a pitch for money. You know, I've been saying at the summit, if everybody who feels aligned with these candidates even gives $2, then these candidates walk away with a really good night. So when you hear a candidate like Liam, and you know that who's there in that seat now, a voting member of Congress out of that 435, is a Trump supporter. and then you hear Liam and everything that Liam's talked about and everything that Edison has talked about, doesn't that make you want to go to liamomara.com.org, I'm sorry, or go to the Progressive Candidate Summit and please give what you can. And even even if it's $5, even if it's $10, whatever is true for you, but your money talks here, because it's the money that allows him to buy the ads. Because what will happen is that the other man will have TV ads, and he will have flyers, and he will have all the things that just make people know who he is. And we're not going to have corporate donations for Liam, right? What we're going to have is you and me. So please do what you can. Edison, you have anything else to say to Liam or to ask him?
Beat Calvert, man.
Beat him, beat him. Okay, thank you, Edison. Thank you so much for being here. All my best to you. All right, there's another gentleman who wants to ask you questions, Liam. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, his name is Faraz Rizvi. Okay, so Faraz Rizvi, please join us in the Zoom room and unmute yourself. Hi, how are you?
Doing well, and yourself?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for being here, and ask away.
Yeah, so I just had a question about really the internet. I think this is one of the things that the recent 2020 Democratic primary kind of started bringing to the fore, but it's something we don't really ask a lot of political questions about. But given with COVID and everything, how we are pretty much digitizing our social relations, work, and education and everything. Do you have any stances on what the future of like US internet policy could be like?
Sure, there's several points we can make there right away. I mean, first off, the internet needs to be a public utility operated for the benefit of all Americans, period. It was developed with Defense Department money using taxpayer resources, and its core protocols are freely available. But the access is tightly controlled by corporations which claim to be public utilities, but exist to make a profit on their infrastructure. That profit motive has slowed development in user base. It's lowered quality. It's lowered speed. We're like 15th in the world right now in average speed, and many rural areas completely lack internet. Faraz is speaking from the district. Even the largest city in the district, Corona, often has extremely spotty and bad internet. My house in Lake Elsinore is literally not wired for anything. I cannot get high-speed internet there. The only thing I can do is run off a hotspot on my phone.
Now we have to worry about net neutrality, which is very concerning to me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the net neutrality issues we're talking here about. I mean, if you're bringing in public investment here, we can put America back on the bleeding edge of innovation. We can guarantee equal access to the resources there. Stop corporations from steering us to just what they want us to see, and actually do what we want. I want to make a point quickly, though, about social media, because it's become such an important part of our lives, and especially during the pandemic and more of us spending time alone here. I mean, I think that we need to regulate these giants or outright nationalize them.
Please.
Our basic civil liberties and our rights to our data are being threatened constantly here.
I would think we had no antitrust laws.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're rapidly entering a dystopian era of surveillance capitalism where we're basically the products bought and sold by big businesses. Data is collected about us and used to steer advertising. There's a complete lack of transparency, which threatens a lot of our civil liberties. I mean, just consider the potential of like facial recognition software, right? I mean, yeah, it might help you unlock your phone, but it also lets businesses scan you in public and track your movements, and can be turned over at any point to law enforcement. Data collection is making us into a corporate-centered police state. And we need better laws to protect our freedoms and the ownership of our own data and our own identities.
So everybody, when you hear Liam talk, we all know people like Liam. The problem is they don't usually run for office. So on one hand, you have these people with all these great ideas and really having these passionate conversations that are very relevant and very contemporary and very hip and very happening and very woke. And then you have people in Congress, and you go, and the dichotomy between the consciousness of the American people and the consciousness of so many of these people in Congress, it's not a laughing matter. I think it's made a lot of people go, look, those people don't know what they're talking about, and that's not where the change happens. Well, it better start happening there. Because when you see all the terrible things happening in this country, they're a result of bad public policy. whether it has to do with systemic racial issues, whether it has to do with police, whether it has to do with the massive transfer of wealth into the hands of 1%, whether it has to do with immoral tax policies, whether it has to do with the degradation of our environment, whether it has to do with lack of health care. These are because of bad public policies, but they're not going to change unless we have good public policies. But just a better version of same old isn't going to fix it either. We need people like Liam. We need people like the ones that you've met here on the summit. I hope you will go to Progressive Candidate Summit. Some of you might have been watching from the beginning and have never gone to the donate button. And I really hope that you will tonight. Tonight's the night to say, okay, I'm going to give what's right for me. I help Liam, help all these candidates because it makes a difference. Faraz, do you have anything else that you want to say to Liam or to ask him?
I think he really covered the bases. I think that was really excellent. I definitely agree that, internet down here needs to be, or really in the United States, needs to be reclassified as a public utility. And thank you for your time.
Liam, one thing I do want to mention, the United States is not having as sophisticated a conversation as we should be about the medical issues involved. For instance, in Europe, here in the United States, we're talking about getting broadband into every classroom. In Europe, they're getting it out of their classrooms. They're getting it out because of the medical issues associated with children's brains. So I do think we need to deepen the conversation about some of this and the effect of some of this. There's some stuff we all probably need to look at there as well.
I mean, there's tons of areas in the economy that will always get more efficient over time with increased productivity and costs can fall, but education and healthcare are not among them. They always have to climb. As the population goes up, we need to spend more on healthcare and education, period. And if we want better outcomes, we have to fund them and provide the resources. I've seen a lot of areas around here, there's extremely uneven policies in school districts. How do you leave behind people that are now stuck at home? How are they supposed to learn? Many of them don't have the technologies. I mean, I know just teaching at the universities, there are a lot of students that just cannot show up to Zoom-based classes because they don't have the equipment to do it.
I hear you. I hear how important it is. Also, Liam, I don't know what's just happened, but you're not as loud as you were. So I don't know if you've moved back or what, but please I want to make sure everybody can hear what you're saying. And for us, thank you very, very much. I so appreciate your coming with us. Thank you.
For having me.
Thank you. Liam, one of the things that I felt very strongly about all of these issues where we treat symptom rather than cause. On one hand, I'm sure you're for Medicare for all, correct?
Absolutely.
And at the same time, we have to ask ourselves, why are Americans experiencing so much more chronic illness than the citizens of other countries of equal wealth? So that has to do with our food policies. That has to do with our agricultural policies, right? Now, if I'm trying to think about the district that you're in, you have some agricultural areas in your district?
We do. A significant part of the district is still rural. I have an interesting sort of hybrid district where there's a long urban stretch along the freeway of cities, and then the whole rest of the district is open areas and farmlands and whatnot.
I think that one of the big strategic errors of the Democratic Party over the last few decades has been this almost abandonment of rural America, or at least perceived. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that as it relates to your district and as it relates to the country.
Thank you. It's something that's frustrated me for ages. Just again, thinking about as a historian, populists and progressives used to dominate the heartland of this country. We used to rule farm country, and we've walked away, and we allow conservative snake oil salesmen to come in and say, I'll fix things for you. And they pass policies that harm people. They harm small businesses. They harm these farmers. And then they just blame the Democrats or something else here and continue to do it. And it's really because we just stopped spending time talking to people.
Right.
And there's too much of a focus on big corporations and on big money and chasing after the cities there. And it's leaving behind America. And realistically, this is where real change needs to happen. We have to engage with ordinary people again.
And I think sometimes when people in rural sections believe that Democrats just represent urban elites, they're not completely wrong. I have heard people when I was running for president, I would talk to people in rural areas who would talk about the fact that before the 1980s, if a farmer wasn't doing well, then they go to the local bank and the bank might say, we know you had a bad year, you'll pay us next year. But once big agricultural conglomerates started taking over, once big banks, they were more than glad to foreclose on these farmers so that they became little more than economic serfs to big ag. A lot of people don't realize the high suicide rate among American farmers today.
Yeah, I mean, my fiance is from a rural area. She's from 5 miles from the Canadian border, in an area that was almost entirely agricultural. And it has been in decline for a long time because the small businesses can't really compete as we've given more and more power to these giant agribusinesses. And then their money, again, pollutes our politics. Until we get the big money out of politics and get rid of this legalized system of bribery, we are going to continue to leave people behind all across this country.
And the policies of big agriculture are not only terrible to the farmers, but terrible to the land. We have lost the reverence connection to the land and to food. What we've done to the topsoil in this country, and people who had lived in these farms that belonged in their families for generations. It's just our lack of reverence for the land, our lack of reverence for food, our lack of reverence for each other. It's wonderful to hear somebody who has a consciousness of these things.
I mean, the entire is 35th in the world for health, like 35th in terms of the health of our population. We are the richest country in the history of the world. Why are our lifespans literally falling? There are a lot of policy areas that are affected here, and you can't just blame it on somebody choosing to go to McDonald's. We are privileging certain companies, certain approaches to product creation, and making it easier there. So oftentimes the poorest are forced to buy the most heavily processed, bad for you food,
live in food
because it's all that's available.
There is no fresh produce.
Right. And that's what's causing a lot of our health issues and the obesity and everything else. And people are saying, look, there must be food. They're overweight. No, it's because there are terrible things in the food that we're feeding them. It's a deliberately manufactured problem.
And a lot of the obesity among American children is actually a case of malnourishment. They keep eating because their systems want nourishment, and they just keep eating what they got at the 7-Eleven because it's a food desert and they don't even have access to fresh produce.
We can't process a lot of the chemicals that they're jamming into these foods. The body doesn't know what to do with this stuff.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're hip to the food issue, to the agricultural issues, because these are as toxic as all these other areas where corporate rule prevails. And let's talk about the Middle East, if we might. What are we going to do about Iran?
About Iran?
Yep.
Honestly, I think literally everything about our Iran policy has been wrong for 70 some years.
Okay.
I mean, back in the 40s, we were basically a hero to them. We were willing to help out. We weren't the historic bad guy as an imperialist power. But ever since we stepped in and took the place of the British, who had been expelled, and overthrew a democratic government.
Okay, so let's slow down, because a lot of people don't know unless they saw Argo, because Ben Affleck did a good job in that movie. So British Petroleum, the democratically elected leader of Iran at that time, had the audacity to say that Iranians should own their own oil. Can you imagine?
They had an old deal that gave them 16% of the profit, not even of the gross, of the profit from everything. And all of that just went to the ruler, not to the people at all. And they're like, can we please renegotiate this deal? Britain said, no, thanks.
And then the United States agreed with Britain. We overthrew the democratically elected person, although it's not like he was a perfect guy, but the point is the Iranians had their own job. And it was that when we then put the Shah in power.
Yeah, we essentially took the second Shah, so Mohammad Reza Shah took power there, and we heavily armed him, trained a secret police to create a 25-year dictatorship. And it was an extraordinarily brutal dictatorship. When a broad coalition of Iranians finally came together and overthrew him, and people forget, the Iranian Revolution wasn't just some religious nut-led kind of fundamentalist movement. That was a small part of an extremely broad coalition that all hated the Shah's government and all feared it. When they had the audacity to overthrow that government, we clamped down on them, we isolated them, we did everything we could to foster war. We supported an 8-year war where Iraq invaded them and used chemical weapons against them. I mean, the Iranians have every bit of reason to want to fear the United States, and yet young Iranians, they don't. They want our stuff. They listen to our music. They have a lot more in common with young Americans than you'd think. It's a broadly very secular population. They have a bad government because our policy has isolated them, and it consistently encourages the most reactionary elements. That is deliberate. The more we can put them on edge, the more we feed into that reactionary element and keep a conservative government. So we have a nice enemy we can point to. Look, Iran is scary. Give us more money for weapons. The whole thing is a scam.
Yeah, and just to be sure, everybody, that doesn't mean we're in any way saying that the Ayatollah Khomeini is a nice man. That's not what.
No, absolutely not. Ayatollah Khamenei, either the current leader, is horrific, and the government there has abused the population, engaged in slaughter. I was solidly behind the 2009 Green Movement trying to overthrow the government, and then more recent protests have tried to do the same thing. It is a horribly repressive government, but we are deliberately strengthening it with our policies to keep it in power.
And I think a lot of Americans don't, when they hear Americans hear the word sanctions, this could be in Iran, this could be in Venezuela, this could be in Cuba. I think a lot of people don't realize what a blunt instrument these sanctions can be. And how when we're mainly just hurting individual people in Iran. And this idea that we've even gotten rid of the sanctions, I mean, the exemptions that were even there before. And also,
I'm hoping that we can have these discussions on a broader level and the voters can learn from it. Obviously, the Cuban sanctions have done nothing but strengthen the Castro regime. The sanctions on Iraq strengthened Saddam Hussein's rule. We forget that this is actually intentional, and we just buy into the rhetoric about sanctions and stopping bad guys. If you want to stop bad guys, you have to help the ordinary people in these countries who want better governments, who want democracy, they want the freedoms we have. We are deliberately harming them by enforcing and strengthening authoritarian governments.
And of course, the idea that people are sold is that the sanctions will make people rise up against their government. But people are smart. They know where that suffering originates is from the sanctions, not from the government alone.
And it strengthens the hand of the dictators because it makes people more dependent upon them. I mean, Saddam Hussein's government was the only thing that could actually set up food distribution and keep basic public order as everything went to hell. It makes those governments stronger, not weaker.
Yes. And of course, the National Defense Authorization Act, once again, passed by the Democrats, didn't do anything to limit President Trump's power to take military action against Iran. I think COVID should make every American think. We were not just skating on thin ice regarding infectious disease. We are skating on similarly thin ice regarding environmental policies. We are skating on similarly thin ice regarding nuclear policies, and we are skating on similarly thin ice regarding our relationships with countries like Iran. And regardless who wins the presidency, and please, dear God, may it not be Donald Trump, it's going to be really important who's in charge in Congress. And once again, even in the House of Representatives, which now is run by Democrats, once again, that National Defense Authorization Act, $738 billion, was the Democrats. So it's what kind of Democrat? And that's why I ask all of you to please realize that it's people like Liam who, this goes beyond conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican. This has to do with a sustainable view. And sustainable means survivable at this point of the human race over the next 100 years. So I hope that you will go to liamomara.org. I hope that you will go to the Progressive Candidate Summit. And I also hope that you will put out some money, because that is the kind of thing that candidates like this need. I have spoken before about one of the reasons I wanted to hold this summit is not only because these people are so great and I want you to know them, get to know them, but because I know myself how hard it is to run for office. And when you have the kind of institutional resistance that candidates like Liam meet, and not just from the Republicans, you would be inconvenient to some of the Democrats too, Liam. I love about you.
I would.
That's what I love about you. So Liam, we're going to let you go in just a couple minutes, but I want to hear if you have any final words, anything you'd like to say to people, anything you want people to know about you, or anything. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for doing this. I have a great deal of respect for the efforts you put in to help down ballot races, because we don't solve our problems just by electing a president. And realistically, the presidency has not changed much in many, many decades. We maintain the same basic policies. The real action is in Congress. And there's a reason Congress usually has like a 7% approval rating. It can't get anything done because it's nothing but a partisan, corrupt, money-fueled cesspool. We have to change the people in there, and we have to put in people that don't have their allegiance to those big money interests. And that does involve stepping up a little bit. And I really appreciate and love that you talk in a more holistic way about our problems, because we can't keep chasing after surface effects. We have to talk about the real systemic issues. We have to go to the core of these things. And that means bringing people into government who can talk about the big picture and show how this is related to this, is related to this, is related to this. So we're not just chasing after one little thing and never making it any better. Americans deserve better. Our wealth could give us a much better life. It honestly infuriates me that we are down to 17th in the world in our living standards, despite being the richest country in the world, and that poverty and extreme poverty are on the rise in this country. We can do better. And that really starts with you. Thank you very much for everybody who's listening. And again, if you can even throw in the price of a coffee. I mean, I keep telling people, if a few thousand people throw in the price of a coffee a month, that would do it. That is the margin of victory. Our little bits, our votes count. Every dollar counts. It really can work.
It's really true, everybody. If you go to liamomara.org, go to progressivecandidatesummit.com, even $1, even $2. If everybody who's watching tonight gives $1, Liam will have a good night. And I could not agree more with everything that he's been talking about. I don't need to tell any of you what a critical moment this is in our nation's history. And we're standing at a crossroads, and we're going to go into some deep darkness or into some deep light. Those are really our only two choices. And who sits in those seats in Congress, in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, will be a huge lever of power, one way or the other. If Biden wins, we're going to need people there to keep pushing him in a progressive direction. And if, God forbid, Trump wins, we really, really need a strong congressional counterforce, and there's not even anything to joke about there. It is so, it's a terrifying prospect at this point of the things that could be happening in this country. Liam, I think the world of you. I love the way your mind works. I love your enthusiasm. I love your excitement. I love the fact that you'll actually pour it into what it takes to actually run for office. I love the fact that you have young people excited in your district. I love, I've lived most of my adult life in Southern California. It's my own soul's base. I know that kind of California thinking that you represent. It makes me very excited to think of you on the floor of the House. And you would be one of those people about whom other people would say, God, can you believe he said that? And you go, oh yeah, because that was Liam. And I so hope you have a chance to, sir. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
And to all of you, I want to thank you for participating in this summit. It's been fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you. You've met some really, really wonderful people. And I so admire all of the candidates. If you look at the progressivecandidatesummit.com, we have a whole endorsement list. It's not just the ones we've had on the summit. They're such great people. There's Julie Oliver in Texas as well. I hope you'll remember Betsy Sweet in Maine. I hope you'll remember Andrew Romanoff. I hope you'll look deeply at that race in Kentucky. The Democratic establishment is all in for Amy McGrath. I do not believe that a centrist is the answer here. We don't need a woman who says her mentor was John McCain. That's not the answer. The answer is one of those progressives. I know that this is a debate. I know a lot of us have different opinions on that one. I'm for Breuer. I respect that other people feel differently about the Booker. A lot of us don't agree on that one, but look into it and support the one that you think is best. My choice there is Breuer, but Booker's good too. And it's obviously up to the people of Kentucky to decide. Help these people. I know what it takes to run, and I know what it takes to get up every morning and to do what they do. And I also know how wonderful it feels when you know there are people who are out there who are helping you. And one of the ways they help you is with their dollars. I know what it's like to look on the Act Blue page and see that somebody sent $10 and see somebody who says, I sent 10, and next time I get paid, I'll send another 10. Wow, that's America. What we're seeing today is on full on display, the best of America and the worst of America. It was always thus with this country. So this is the deal. When I was young, there was a saying, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I don't think that's ever been more true. Please be part of the solution. Thank you so much for participating. Text your friends, tell them about Liam, whether they live in California or not, liamomera.org. Keep it up. Keep putting all this stuff on your Facebook, on your Twitter, on your social media, on your Instagram. Be part of the solution, because a miracle is going to happen here in this country. And just visualize it, see it in November 3rd. We're going to repudiate systems of injustice. We are going to repudiate racism. We're going to repudiate environmental degradation. We are going to repudiate so many of the shadows that have accumulated in this country. And we are going to replace them with some really kick-ass, fabulous people like Liam O'Mara. God bless you all. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Wendy Zalo, who's been a marvelous producer of this of the summit. Thank you, Wendy, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you to my friend Lauren Selsky, who's helped as well. Thank you to all you wonderful people who are the campaign aides and volunteers. Remember, you can help Liam and all of these candidates, regardless of where you live. Go to their websites, be part of the solution. Go to bed every night knowing you did your part. Thank you. I'll see you next time. All my best and much love. Bye-bye.